All right, new bombshell reports are shedding light on the Pacific Palisades wildfire and the extreme mismanagement from both state and local officials as the left tries to always convince you government is the answer to everything, all of your problems. Don't worry, they'll take care of every aspect of your life. That's what the new Green Deal is, right? Ask yourself, how are your government schools doing where you live? How did those Obamacare promises work out for you and your family? How's law and order in your small town or big city, and especially deep blue states? And by the way, what happened to that Social Security lockbox that they, in fact, raided and squandered? Now, listen to this. According to the shocking revelations, days before the fire ignited, areas from a previous fire were still smoldering. Firefighters who alerted their battalion chief to this, they were told to leave the area. They said it's a bad idea instead of monitoring it. Now, before this reignited into the massive fire days later, we know that 12 were injured and destroying thousands and thousands of homes, many of which have still not been rebuilt, the majority of which have not been rebuilt nearly a year later, over 10 months later. This fire was completely mismanaged at every level according to these reports, going all the way up to the to state and their failure. Governor Tweety Bird, Gavin Newsom, does the buck, should the buck stop with him? Now, to this day, nobody's really answered really simple questions, such as why wasn't there water in the reservoir specifically designed for predictable wildfires and predictable Santa Ana winds like this one? Why did fire hydrants in Southern California, why did they run dry? The people who lost everything in all this, devastation, and what now appears to be largely preventable disaster, I think they deserve answers. At least Governor Newsom called President Biden at the time, or did he? At least seemingly pretended to. You might remember this moment.
That was my daughter's school, Governor. Please tell me what you're going to do. I'm not going to hurt him, I promise.
I'm literally talking to the president right now to specifically answer the question of what we can do for you and your daughter.
Can I hear it? Can I hear your call? Because I don't believe it.
I'm sorry. There's literally, I've tried 5 times. That's why I'm walking around to make.
Why is the president not taking your call?
Because it's not going through.
Why?
So I have to get cell service.
Did I hear that right? I'm talking to the president right now. Well, I'm trying to call the president. Now, in fairness, at least Gavin Newsom was in California during the time of the fires. The same cannot be said for LA Mayor Karen Bass, who was not only not in Los Angeles or in the state of California, she wasn't even in the country. Instead, she was attending the swearing in of the new president of Ghana, an event that obviously requires the attendance of the mayor of Los Angeles. But given her answers, or lack thereof, upon arriving back in LA, I'm not sure how much she would have helped anyway. Take a look.
Do you owe citizens an apology for being absent while their homes were burning? And do you regret cutting the fire department budget by millions of dollars, Madam Mayor? Have you nothing to say today? Have you absolutely nothing to say to the citizens today? Elon Musk says that you're utterly incompetent. Are you considering your position? Madam Mayor, have you absolutely nothing to say to the citizens today who are dealing with this disaster? No apology for them? Do you think you should have been visiting Ghana while this was unfolding back home?
All right, here with reaction, Pacific Palisades homeowner who still has not had his home rebuilt, Greg Champion, and California Republican gubernatorial candidate, our old friend Steve Hilton is with us. Mr. Champion, here we are over 10 months later. How many homes in the area have been rebuilt, and have you been able to get a permit to rebuild your home?
Sean, thanks for having me on tonight. Watching those clips of those two just horrible leaders in Newsom and Bass just infuriates me. So I would say I've driven around the neighborhood a few times, and there's not one single home built 100%. There's a few homes here and there. One reason I am hesitating on moving back to the Palisades and rebuilding is because no one on my street is rebuilding. So even if I rebuild, I'm going to be building in a fire zone with no neighbors. And I spoke with two very well-known general contractors today in terms of permits. And I said, hey, tell me about the permit system. He says, she talked a good game. You know, President Trump came out right after the fires and basically put his finger in her chest and said, hey, get these permits through fast. And she's all talk and no action. They are in the same, people have to go through the same hoops and jump through the hoops to get the permits as they did before. There's no additional staffing. And, you know, the build back in the Palisades is very, very slow at this time.
How many homes would you say, as you drive through your neighborhood, have been rebuilt?
Like I said, Sean, I don't think there's one single home that has been finished in the 10 months. That would be an
I was
extraordinary
told there
feat.
was one, but that they had their permit ahead of time. They were going to do a rebuild anyway.
Maybe
That's
there's
from a
the
friend of
one
mine.
lone soldier out of thousands of houses. You know, these fires were catastrophic to this beautiful neighborhood we know as Palisades. People moved out of state. They moved to Texas. They moved to Montana. They moved to Tennessee. They're done with California because of the mismanagement. You said it earlier. They mismanaged this fire before January 7th. They mismanaged it during the January 7th and beyond, and they certainly have mismanaged and miscommunicated aftermath.
You know, Steve Hilton, the LA Times published a series of really bombshell revelations about the initial response to the first blaze and how the battalion chief, shortly after it broke out in the early hours of New Year's Day, you know, small fire, 8 acres, that was extinguished, but the firefighters told their bosses that it was a bad idea to leave because there was still smoldering fires. As you read and as we now learn more, and as you look at this insane permit process, by the way, are they still making people out there pay property taxes when they don't have a home there anymore?
Of course, because this is who they are. And like Greg, I hadn't seen that video for a while. I mean, that is a disgrace from Karen Bass. She should have resigned the next day to show up in a city that is reeling from that disaster and to have such contempt for people. What a disgrace she is. And that video of Gavin Newsom, by the way, that mom there, Rachel Darvish, she's now working with me on my campaign to bring change to California, specifically on the permits. The reason that nothing's happening is captured in a quote from Karen Bass from months ago. She did this big press conference announcing she's streamlining permitting. This is what she actually, so the post that she put out said, I've just signed an executive order streamlining permitting to rebuild LA. I watched the actual video. This is what she said. I have just signed an executive order tasking agency heads with developing paths forward to streamlining permitting. Total BS. These are process people. They have no idea how to get anything done. And it's not just the incompetence, it's also the ideological extremism, the environmental extremism. That's why there was no water. I've just been in the Central Valley of California today with our great farmers. They're explaining to me that President Trump is exactly right, that it was the water issue that meant that there was no water there because it was so expensive, because they're restricting it to save smelt. And by the way, on the reignition of that Lockman fire, the January the 1st fire, guess what we're hearing now? The reason they didn't want the firefighters to go back in there was to protect an endangered plant, the milk vetch. And you can't make this stuff up. People need to be held accountable. When I'm governor, we're going to have a full investigation and hold everyone accountable for these failures.
This has gone on for a long time. I was out there. We did a show in the San Joaquin Valley, and that show was about how farmers were not allowed to farm because they didn't have the water, because they were protecting the Delta smelt, which is not even an endangered species. You know, Greg Champion, when people lose their homes, it's a big part of their lives. I'm sorry for you and for everybody in the Pacific Palisades. I'm sorry that your government is not responsive and helping you, you know, in your quest to rebuild your lives. I don't know what this means for the thousands of you out there. You have my deepest sympathies, and I do believe, Steve Hilton, we've had many conversations on and off air. You'd be a great governor. I worry about the migration. Smart people have left. They have left in droves, and with them, a lot of money as well. But Greg, good luck to you and your family. Steve, good luck in your campaign. All right, now for generation.